my wife's cheating on me. She's sleeping with another man. I know that for certain, or I don't know that for certain, whether she's, fucking him right now or they're having an emotional affair. I don't know what's going on. That's what a man today on our private Facebook forum asked. And I actually reached out a few days ago because a week ago, a man I was speaking with said a very similar thing, that his wife was having active affairs since their first child was born. They have 3 kiddos. The oldest is 9. And for the past 8 years, basically right in his face, she's been having, I should say, emotional affairs and physical affairs. Facebook, none of his pictures are on Facebook. He drained his 401k a month ago to start yet another business for her. And I told this man, within our coaching, that I don't coach a man to save his marriage. I coach a man to save him from the abyss of the free fall into hell that I felt over 5 years ago when I was going through something really similar at the end of my marriage. She had an emotional affair previously, and the beginning of 2015, I saw a text on her phone from another man. And after 6 months of therapy, which didn't do much for us, she then admitted one Sunday morning over coffee right behind our house on the deck that she'd actually slept with that man. That was the beginning of 2015. And I felt like my life was over. And I found Steve Horseman in Northern Colorado with Good Guys to Great Men and started my own men's journey. And so fast forward, I now coach men. I'm a master's level coach. And I asked Sven Masterson, master level coach as well, to come on and talk with me about men specifically that have a background in Christianity or faith, because I find it very difficult. These 2 men that I just referred to in their story, they're men of faith, and they go to this sort of using faith as a shield. So I asked Sven to come on. This is what we're going to call a master's degree in manhood. At least that's the working title. And I wanted to ask Sven, and we were chatting a little bit before I just hit record, about it's a difficult, very deep, high level, complicated conversation around whether it's secular spirituality or materialism, as you said, Sven, or Christianity, or however you define your faith. It's a really difficult conversation. So Sven, thanks for coming on, man. I hope this is Conversations with Jeff and Sven ongoing.
Yeah, this is right up my alley and yours too, right? It's kind of just reflective when we're together in person, like talking about whatever comes up. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. This is really cool.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So, as kind of the trying to grab a few definitions and be prepared, I grabbed Oxford and Cambridge and Collins' definition of spirituality. So Oxford says the quality of being concerned with the human spirit. Actually, go ahead and share the screen in case you're watching this, gentlemen watching this. The quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things. Another is the quality that involves deep feelings and beliefs of a religious nature rather than the physical parts of life. Or Collins says, related to people's thoughts and beliefs rather than to their bodies and physical surroundings. And I don't need to share this 1-minute video. I do have it primed, but I'll just say that this Reverend Daniel Nazem, he says that spirituality is what makes me who I am. And so what makes me who I am? So, guys, I wanted to talk with Sven because I was raised without any type of religion or spirituality. My baby boomer parents said that when I asked them when I was a teenager, why we don't go to church or things like this, they said, because we wanted to let you choose your own religion or your own spirituality. Well, as a child, my spirituality was Lucky Charms, the Smurfs, and the A-Team. I didn't, so I was like, how am I going to choose a church? I'm not when I'm a child. So basically it was no religion or spirituality.
But they gave it the A-Team, so they did something right.
Yeah, exactly. Right after MacGyver. It's right after MacGyver.
The best shows in history right there.
Yeah, exactly. That's my church. MacGyver's my church. As long as you got a paperclip and some gum, you're good to go. And so I spent a lot of my life, I went to a Lutheran college and took monotheism classes because I went there because my best friend went there and I liked the major. So I didn't mind that it was a religious college. I've visited Southeast Asia and taught English and put my head down in Buddhist temples. I've put my hands and my head on Chichen Itza in Mexico and on Tikal in Guatemala, and visited Christian churches of various denominations here in the U.S. And I know, Sven, you were raised Christian, right? So I'm curious about your background.
Man, talk about terms. One of the hard parts is the word Christian means so many things in both history and culture. Even different parts of the country have a different understanding of what Christian means. So I personally hate the label. I would say I was raised in a family that progressively was very involved in evangelical Christianity, right? I rejected that actually fairly early, maybe my adolescence, and then I was a skinhead for a while actually, and involved in that whole scene. It was very party centric, somewhat violent scene. It was not a racist skinhead movement where I lived, but anyway, that got me into drugs, and I had an encounter with some LSD that went really, really bad, and not just a physical way, but also in a legal way. Got myself in a lot of trouble, and I actually was high on LSD. And my mother, who's very devout in her evangelical Christian worldview, she was just like insistent that she pray for me. I was like, whatever, I was just a little backstory. The state police had called and said, hey, if this girl that you gave LSD to dies, we're going to charge you with murder. And I don't even remember if the 90s movie, Faces of Death, did you ever see that? Like,
yeah.
Real life footage of people dying. I had just seen that a few weeks ago, and I was just mortified of like getting electrocuted in jail for this girl dying. Anyway, I was just freaking the hell out on acid. I'm like, whatever, Mom. And so she prayed for me. Nothing magical happened at all. But in my kind of despair of life, I went to bed, and I'm just like, hey, I don't really believe in this God thing, but I'm willing. If it's real, hey, have at it. Kind of. And it was really a lackadaisical. It was sincere, but not very. It didn't feel very special to me. I guess my point. And I slept like a baby that night, and I don't know. I woke up with a bit of a renewed sense of like there's something going on here. And then I've spent my whole life trying to figure out exactly what that meant. Got very religious for a while in the evangelical church. Thought I wanted to be a missionary. Went overseas a number of times on missionary trips. Went to school to be one, and then got kicked out in the middle of that when I ran into some power struggles because I really brought forward a lot of independence and non-conformity attributes from my punk rock skinhead days. I'm really glad that I did because it served me really well when I got in institutions that insisted on controlling people. I was just like, no, that's not going to work for me. That's what got me kicked out. Actually, we were told to beat our 1-year-old child more or less for standing up in his crib, and we're like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that.
Wow.
Got kicked out. That's why I live where I live. We ended up just kind of staying here. So that's my really, really quick story with evangelicalism. Stayed involved in churches. I've been a leader in churches. I've been a teaching elder in churches. I'm very familiar with that scene. But yeah, it means something different. Like people will say, are you a Christian now? They could mean, are you an American? Like some people just equate the two together, right? In other people's mindsets, it might mean you're a white American male. It could mean so many things that I've just disposed of the title entirely because it's become my conviction in my life that I want to be known for my character and action, not for some label that I can put on a bumper sticker. And that all came from growing up in this environment where seeing, and you probably don't see this on Facebook, but the Christians listening to this will know, like the whole Facebook Christian merch thing is like, here's your T-shirt with a cross on it, or a picture of Jesus's head, and we have all these ways to try to identify ourselves with something, and I kind of wonder, is that a substitute because the character of our person is not already displaying this, right? So, yeah, I don't like to talk labels. I don't like to ask people to identify with something because it's lazy. I would much rather get to know you as a man, know all about Jeff, and then just know you by the the character and the quality of your character in person. And I think we have to get away from the idea that we should label one another that way, because it really short circuits that process. It allows us to fast track, try to categorize somebody without ever doing the work, right? So I've just moved away from that entirely. I mean, I'm happy to answer a question somebody has about specific ideas I might have, but I'm not going to make it too easy for them by labeling them or labeling me. So that's kind of my background. I tell people all the time, a lot of Christians would really struggle with me because I'm pretty nonconformist, so I don't toe very many party lines. If somebody says, here's what you should think as a Christian, I'm just like, no. And so I'm kind of in this, like, the DMZ between Judaism and Christianity, and that, I guess we're just our own thing. There's no group I could say I belong to them. And we live in a culture that wants to find belonging in groups. So it's a bit hard. I feel like an independent consultant when it comes to faith, more or less.
Yeah, I like the independent consultant. Well, one thing I love about you, Sven, is that you're not just necessarily one dogmatic end of the spectrum as far as your beliefs. You believe in the actions of the man. We were talking about one of your, that really rubs you the wrong way is these memes about Christianity, or the shirt. I got the shirt, got the t-shirt, right? So I'm good, whatever, good fill in the blank. And the mental masturbation around these memes versus the actions you take in the world as a man, right? So I want to smash that against.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, thank you. I want to smash that, the actions you take versus the meme masturbation. I want to smash that up against this topic that when I'm coaching a man, I find, especially a man who's of what he'll call strong faith, which he seems to use as I don't know, an excuse or a shield, or it almost seems like instead of his own self being the center of his values and his actions, he's justifying staying in a marriage where the woman is having an affair or actively having affairs, or is at the very least trampling all over him as a man and his boundaries. And he'll kind of use this excuse of, oh, well, I'm a man of God, so therefore I'm going to stay in the marriage no matter what. And that's what I wanted to ask you about, because there's some men that, it's not my job to convince anyone of anything as a coach. However, if he comes to me for help and I'm not able to help him, I feel like I'm not doing my due diligence. So I wanted to ask you about that. And I have a case study here in a minute, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think you actually have a way more ability to help than you realize, because you're a guy that does not abide cliche. And really, you make people unpack anything they say. And a statement of, hey, my faith won't let me do this, is like any other statement. It's, well, let's get a little deeper than that, right? I think it is appealing to to all people, and it expresses itself a unique way in faith, to have the prospect of somebody else defining your value system. So, and we see this all over the world. Let's just take faith out of it and spirituality and say politics, right? It's just super easy for a lot of people to say, I'm going to identify with that party because I don't want to have to do the hard work of figuring out how I think about everything in that platform. So I'm just going to adopt this wholesale point of view because I'm lazy as shit is the real issue, right? And so people can tend to do that with faith, and I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush here, but a lot of people do that. And so they say, well, I'm pretty sure our group is not on board with, this thing, like maybe it's divorce, or maybe it's, how to respond to an adulterous relationship, or maybe it's masturbation is a huge one, right? A staggering number of people of faith have like massive amounts of shame over masturbation, for example, without actually a lot of theological basis for it. So this is an example. And a common tell is when people ask that guy a question, what do you think about this issue? He'd be like, honey, what is it that we think? And he's asking his wife kind of like, what is our group? What is this group that we're part of think. And that's just the abdication of the responsibility to declare your own values and understand why you think them, but also of just doing the work of, investigating the human experience. Why do you believe what you believe? And I don't think that's unique to people of faith. It's just sometimes faith is that it's like a shortcut. I'm a Christian, so I can't do that. But I don't personally find that to be a legitimate reason to just throw out why you'll stay in a relationship with somebody who clearly is violating the covenant you have with them, right? It's all, and that's where I said it's all about values. So, do you know what your values are? And I would say all of us are constantly making decisions, and every one of our decisions are a value decision, right? So, you get a check in the mail, random check. Hey, Jeff, here's $10,000. You sit down. How am I going to spend this? Value decision, right? Cynthia comes to you and says, "Hey, I love another dude." You're going to make your decision in that moment based on the value system you have. If faith informs that, great. There's nothing wrong with that, informing that versus any other outside resource. You read a lot, you study a lot, you're familiar with a lot of people's points of views, and all of those have informed the construction of Jeff Allen's value system, right? And so the person of faith has added those sources to their construction of values, hopefully. So if you decide to stay in a relationship with somebody who's cheating on you, you are, whether you think you are or not, you're making a value decision. And the decision could have all kinds of things behind it, but ultimately you value something more than leaving the relationship, or more than ending the relationship. Right? It could be a number of things. But if I was coaching a guy who said that, I'm gonna get really deep into that. Okay, don't just tell me because you're Christian faith, specifically what is the value that is keeping you in the relationship? Now, suppose a man says, you know what, I totally value myself. I know who I am unapologetically. It really pains me to see this woman doing this. And I have a really big heart. I'm okay. I know I'm okay. And from that place of being okay, I want to show her some grace and maybe unmerited kindness, despite the fact she's treating me like shit, right? All right. Is that legit value? I mean,
it's his decision, right?
Yeah. It's his decision, but at least he knows why he's making it, right?
Right.
A lot of people, and I'm not, this is not a critique of Catholicism, this is just more prominent in Catholicism, believe that, they're not allowed to divorce, for example.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. It seems like, the marriage, I can never leave the marriage, I can never divorce, seems to be set in stone, and then everything else seems to fall after that. Yeah.
I personally study that topic exhaustively, and it all goes back to what you value, what you think, that's a complicated topic, but most people, I think, either you have a theology-based reason that you believe that, which means you've studied the scriptures yourself, you know exactly why you believe that, or you have my church leaders, this is the doctrine of our church or our institution, and our institution believes this is wrong, so I believe it's wrong. I personally have little respect for the latter, because that person has advocated, again, their value system to being formed by someone else, which I find to be a very non-biblical idea and a non-spiritual idea, because it violates the whole idea of human sovereignty and makes some sort of hierarchy responsible for your well-being. And I just personally don't buy it. If you have a theological idea there, we can't get super deep into that in this call. It would take the whole call. But I don't think it's very strong. I lived this way for a long time. I was of the same persuasion. The scriptures, which Christians hold to be, to some degree or another, hopefully, they believe is the word of God, the word of the Creator, so it needs to be obeyed, right? So if you take that position in which a lot of a person of strong religious faith is going to say, yes, I believe the Bible is the Word of God. Okay. And so then they believe, well, from that Word of God, from the Bible, I believe this, this, and this, and this, and that's why I can't get divorced. And that's the kind of situation I grew up in. That's the conviction I started my marriage in. Couple things wrong with that. One, evangelical theology is, in my opinion, really kind of messed up in a lot of ways. And there's some big problems with that a lot of Christians don't understand. And again, rather than get into that here, I've written a pretty exhaustive paper about it. If somebody wants to read it, that goes into the theology part. But I want to talk more from personal experience. I don't know if you're a handy guy, or if you have a hot water heater in your house.
Yeah, sure.
Big kind of tanks. Okay. So one of the things that's required on a hot water heater is the pressure relief valve. So if you don't have a pressure relief valve and your hot water heater malfunctions, there's nowhere for the pressure to go. You blow your hot water heater up, right? And what I discovered personally was, if you approach marriage with no pressure relief valve, which I believe divorce is a pressure relief valve, meaning it's a last resort. It's there in case there's a malfunction. But if you take that pressure relief valve out of marriage, what you will inevitably do is you will play it safe, which means you'll never operate at the level of heat that you could, right? Because you have no relief valve. So it means when something needs to be said, something hard or done, or you just get into the power struggle stage like Gottman talks about, you're going to probably edit yourself to a degree that either you're just going to completely explode, like, because you don't have a pressure relief valve, or you're going to completely stay dishonest to your own experiences, because you won't let yourself develop that much fire, right? And the thing is, you can't survive the power struggle stage and get to where you need to get in marriage without getting very, very real. Like, you have to get really, really raw, address some really, really hard stuff in your life to make it past the power struggle stage and stage 4. And trying to do that without a pressure relief valve, what you end up doing is you just stay in stage 3 indefinitely. So the trend I see in people who say divorce is never an option is that you stay in stage 3, resentment, anger, hostility, contempt, stonewalling, disconnection. You just stay there for decades because you believe you put this unnecessary, this has to work, right? And so there's no way for you to, like, in your own mind, to say, well, I don't want it to go this way, right? But when you know there's a pressure relief valve, you're willing to take risk because you know that if you turn up the heat too high, the pressure relief valve lets that steam off. Maybe that's not a useful metaphor for some people.
Well, I mean, so I agree with some of what you said, and some other things I'd probably frame a little different way. So let me talk about the way the way I believe, and the way I would say that is, I'd see the pressure release valve as our tribe of men that we go to share our shit. So we turn up the heat in our relationship, right? And then when we're in that almost isolated microcosm without going to men that we look up to and that we are Spartan in life together. We believe in similar things. We have values in similar ways. We hold each other accountable. We're able to take constructive criticism to and from those men. That, to me, or doing healthy things, lifting weights, going on. That's what I feel as the pressure relief valve, which I've had to deal with a lot of personal anger in my past. My father was kind of an angry guy, born outside of Savannah, Georgia, in the country when, in 1943, and he's kept it together at work, but at home he was pretty angry about stuff. And I kind of picked up on that. We just share everything. We put everything on our sleeve and we kind of yell it out. That's what my parents did and my grandparents did. But for me, like the divorce option, well, this has to go. So one of my core beliefs is that, well, certainly we can't force someone to stay with us. So the masculine within all of us, or us as a man, or the the drive and masculine within a woman doesn't want to feel trapped. So if it's this finish line of marriage that feels like the end or trapped or it never changes, we fear that exploding. Okay. And so to me, yeah, I hear what you're saying about exploding, but to me, it's how do we live our life as a man where she wants to stay with us in the understanding that if we grow apart, if we no longer believe that relationship is for the same purpose, then we replace the water heater before it explodes. Like we don't need to blow up the water heater if we both don't believe in the same things. And then we're back to, well, a man of quote faith says, well, I can never replace my water heater. It's the one I'm going with forever, no matter what.
That's the point. And so let me reframe some of this, because the unfortunate part about a pressure relief valve is you probably pulled pressure relief as a metaphor, and that was not my intent. What the pressure relief valve, without a pressure relief valve, the issue is if you want your water heater to last, you can never have adequate heat. That's probably more of the important metaphor. It was a matter of, it's really, the metaphor is outcome dependence. If you have no pressure relief valve on your water heater, you're outcome dependent with your water heater, meaning because it has to last forever, you'll keep the temperature low. Sure. The problem is for both the man and the woman, because you're at such a low temperature, you'll never go high. So you'll never go high passionately, meaning you're never going to create polarity in your marriage because you're constantly trying to keep the peace. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So, and that works against you. It's just like if you had no pressure relief valve in your house hot water heater, you're going to take lukewarm showers the rest of your damn life. And that's the more important takeaway for me in the metaphor was the pressure relief valve is there so that you can have nice hot heat in your hot water heater. And I would suggest divorce serves that metaphor, meaning it's there so that you can push the level that you need to push as a man and in the relationship to have the polarity you need for marriage to work, in both the good times and the bad. So I totally agree with what you're saying, like about, when you feel stuck. Stuck to me is a byproduct of living what I would say kind of a low mood, low energy, Groundhog Day kind of monotony, and in a masculine sense is a lack of action. So I would ask myself, why is there a lack of action? And there's a number of reasons. Insecurity is a big one. But when marriage is involved, a lot of times a man is afraid to be that masculine guy, oftentimes because church is emasculating him, to be honest, but lack of confidence in who he is. But he's afraid to push into that space because he's he doesn't want to upset the apple cart. He doesn't want to rock the boat in the marriage that he has to stay in for the rest of his life, right? So, I got married at 20, and I remember my wife telling me at 23, hey, I don't have the same feelings for you anymore. And I was like, I'm looking at 50 plus years of this. And I remember just being completely like, oh my gosh, what do I do with this now? It's one thing to hear it when you're 40, 50 years old, right? But when you have that conviction that marriage is forever, no matter what, till one of you dies, and you hear it in your 20s, what it made me want is one of us to die. So that's the irony of the whole fear of divorce is I think most honest guys will say, oh, I'm committed to marriage till death, right? But they're secretly wanting their spouse to die because that's the only way they feel like they can get into the place where they can feel alive. That was my story. And it's a hard thing to say on video or in a blog, whatever.
Sure. Well,
it's like, yeah, I wanted you to die a lot of the times because I was so desperate for the life I knew was possible that I would not push into in my marriage because of till death do us part, right? So interestingly, when my view on that changed, and it had nothing to do with marriage, I pushed into that study for theological geeky reasons. And I discovered a new truth about it. And I was like, wow, I've been wrong. And that introduced a pressure relief valve kind of accidentally in my thinking. And then I was really willing to get very real as a man. And that's exactly what I needed to do for my marriage to be great. So I know it sounds counterintuitive to like embrace the idea of divorce as being a way to have a better marriage, but it made my marriage better.
Well, a woman, I mean, evolutionary psychology, right? I love the study of that. Is that women? There's this slightly flippant saying that women wait at the finish line and they pick the winners, or they wait at the finish line and they fuck the winners. And so men want to win because they want the women. And it's this drive toward our betterment as a species that's been going on for millions of years, and that hasn't changed since the 1950s or 60s, right? And if I kind of bring that into the conversation of, I wasn't taught how to be amazing in a relationship. Men across the board, especially nowadays, have no model to be how amazing in a relationship, to be that masculine strength, but also know how to speak up for yourself, to use your terms of turn the heat up so that you can actually you can stand up for your boundaries and not worry about the water heater blowing up in your face, because that's the only one that you're ever going to get. Or you're not going to play it safe if you know how to be that man that you want to be. And that's one thing that I love is I didn't have this over 5 years ago. And that's why I literally wake up at 3 a.m. often and start studying and reading. And instead of watching Netflix, I'll study another form of like somatic experiencing, which is a form of therapy, or I'll open a different book, or I'll read David Data, or, on and on, Brene Brown, on and on. Right. And that's why I love talking with you, is you have a different experience as far as scripture and different books that you've read and different approach. We've both come from different ends of the spectrum, if you will. I had basically no spirituality, and you had this evangelical type of religious spirituality, and we've kind of come into the middle.
I think their perspectives on the same truths, to be honest. Maybe not in the minutia, but I think that's irrelevant. Like even your point about, okay, women are standing on the finish line, waiting to pick or fuck the winners. What is a winning man, right? I mean, what makes a man win in the first place? It's a lack of apology for who he is. It's a willingness to go all out, balls out and deep. And really what keeps a man from doing that is fear and insecurity. So to me, that's the thing that a woman is really, it's not the fact that he won. It's because he won because he's already that guy. So it's like, what are the attributes of a winner? Where did those come from? And the truth is, because of the institutionalization of faith, fear is very rampant in religious people. It's very real in a secular person too, but it's just from a different place, right? Like, all humanity is going to have to address their insecurity of person, and better have a good solution if you want to find security, right? And so we all have that common human experience. For the religious person, it looks one way. It looks based on, a number of things. How well am I doing? It's performance, and just the language changes. Instead of it's like, well, how well do I win in the stock market? Maybe it's how well do I do as in my religious role? How good have I done as a follower, right? And so there's this fear of punishment if I get it wrong, and that fear of punishment or penalty when you get it wrong, whether you're a secular person or you're a person of faith, is what's undermining you and keeping you from going balls out, because you're afraid of punishment. When you're afraid, you hold back, right? So I see a lot of cohesiveness in that idea. Like, I believe we're all supposed to be winners, and we're all capable of being winners. And the only thing that gets in the way of that is fear and insecurity. Napoleon Hill fan at all? Or everybody else?
Yeah, thinking right.
So yeah, he talks a lot about this, and I think in a really neat way, and just how it's a mind thing, right? And the thoughts we have are what create what's in our mind, what makes us afraid, but also what makes us empowered. And in my opinion, what faith can give to people is empowerment if they understand it without fear. And so, and then that does allow people to run, like, kind of balls out and win. And I think that guy, no matter what his background is, the guy who's living without fear and apology for himself, is going to be very, very attractive to a woman. And he's going to be at the finish line. That's my opinion.
Yeah, so I agree with you completely. I love how you said it's the characteristics of the man that won the race that he already had prior to crossing the finish line, or the checkered flag. And that's totally right. I love that. And one thing I want to add on too, I'll add a layer on that, is that, I still have fear. I think we all have fear. It's a matter of how you process it, what you do with it, how you think about fear. And that's something that I can thank my, like I said, baby boomer parents, in that they're just like, go for it. And they supported me to go for whatever I was going to go for. And so I can thank them that, sure, I have fear, but I know I'm not going to die. I know I'm not going to be exiled from the tribe.
Yeah.
And
I don't mean
think
the
that's
presence of any fear is bad. I mean, everybody has fear. It's whether or not you have courage and what you do with your fear. But the religious person might have a really unique fear that the consequences are eternal if I get this wrong. And again, it goes back to what your theology is, what you believe specifically about a lot of these nitty-gritty spiritual truths. Is God angry with you? Are you in danger of punishment, either temporarily or eternally, by the little things you get right and get wrong? And if you live that way, whether it's coming from a religious background or a domineering parent, it doesn't matter. You're going to take on a fear that is paralyzing, right? And that's the kind of fear I'm talking about. We all experience fear, but courage is doing things despite fear, right? And so it's even in a race, the guys winning the race, they still encounter the same fear and anxiety and doubt that anybody else does at the start line, but they keep going. So that comes down to the attribute of the man, in my opinion. Like, courage is an attribute that you have, and that's going to make you win, right?
Yeah. So I want to read some of this case study because it's so impactful as far as what I felt like I was going through over 5 years ago, as I've said a couple times, and what this man is going through today. And right after this, he said, but I believe God wants me to stay in the marriage. Basically, we're kind of back to number one. And so I'm curious how you might. So you've said, well, what are your values as a man? But if he goes back to, and maybe the answer is he may not be a fit for coaching if he's just going to be settled into this, I'll be married forever no matter what, whether she lights my house on fire, kicks my dog, cuts my penis off in the middle of the night, I'm not going to divorce her. And I guess maybe there's no, quote, help, whatever the word help means. Let me go ahead and read this case study. So this man says, we know him fairly well in our Facebook group. So by the way, Sven, I want you to share your Mentoring Men website, and I'll share my website before we get off the call today. But so this man's in one of our Facebook groups, and he says, I need to rant. I just got back from a ski trip where I met my sister and her husband with my wife. We had fun. My wife and sister got drunk every night, which upset me because my wife would be flirty with me, but we haven't had sex in 7 months. Then she would say she feels sick, and then she said she'd feel tired when we got back to the room, like not wanting to get it on with him, right? Making reasons. Remember, I don't drink. I'm sober this entire trip. My wife told my sister about her affair and said she was sorry. So this is she's just talking about her past affair right in front of everyone during the ski trip. Then my wife said it was hard yesterday as she was in love with her affair guy, and it's been a year since they talked. Okay, so we get back home and she says she wants on my phone plan. Great. So I take her phone to switch over, and when I do, I see a text with a word only my wife's affair guy used. So I click it, and they had been communicating a month ago when she said that she hadn't been talking to him for a year. I said, hey, what's this? And she said, wow, 1 minute and you're already snooping. I was just texting for his birthday, she said. I said, I just don't understand why you lied to all of us. She immediately replied, I want a divorce. I can't live like this. Then she told both of our kids. They've been crying all night. She now says she will file soon. I'm so hurt right now for my kids. We just started what I thought was a new start and a new home. So I think they just bought a new house together too. Yet to her, I guess the fairy tale outweighs real life. She said the affair guy hurt her worse than I did. The affair guy is engaged to another woman, yet she's still willing to forgive him if he would come back, just not to me, she said. What the fuck? I slept with my son last night to ease his pain. Now my wife's entire family is coming for Christmas, which sucks, as her mom said all my trips are trying to buy her daughter's love. I was trying to create opportunities to connect. Her mom also said I shouldn't block her affair guy, who's a felon, from her just because because he wasn't a pedophile. It was only a drug robbery and 15 years ago, and he's done his time. Holy shit. I feel so used again. Oh, and she keeps bringing up my shit from over 2 years ago to rationalize her actions. I wonder if I should file for divorce first or if that would make a difference. The fucked up thing is I still love her. I don't want to divorce. I'm just starting to feel like a security blanket for my wife with no passion and no willingness to even try to work on us. She's so selfish and self-centered right now. She calls it self-care. I guess just continue to work on me since I can't control if she files or not. Please pray for my family. Thank you. Faith over fear, endless journey.
Man, there's a lot there, Jeff.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to show that because, of course, this isn't in a vacuum. Whether, the man watching this right now, no matter how much of this he's experiencing or not, underlying this as the whole sort of theme of today and spirituality is he immediately went to, and divorce is not an option.
Yeah.
Right. And the waiting and sitting back and maybe she'll file and what can I do? I can't do anything. So I'm curious what hit you there?
Man, there's a lot. I could probably reread that a number of times. The first thing that jumps out to me is very clear is there's very much fuzziness on values there. I don't mean that as critique. This is, I think, why these things happen. I don't think personally affairs happen in vacuum. I don't think we're just really great men and our wives drift off and go fuck other guys. I just don't think it works that way. There's usually a lack of polarity, or there's misunderstanding. There's things that build up contempt, misunderstanding that drive partners away. And the way to get back is to start with very clear values. So in my coaching practice, the very first session I spend with guys is explaining this pyramid of how did we get where we are? How did we get the result in life that we got? And it goes backward from, the results you have, this comes from Dr. Charlie Cartwright, of course, are a result of your habits, and your habits are a result of your actions are a result of your beliefs are a result of your thoughts, and your thoughts are based on what you trust to be true. And so the first thing I would say, okay, well, how well is this no divorce thing, this value of yours, how well has it worked out? Because this and all your other values have put you exactly where you are in this moment. And that's a really, really hard message to hear as a human being, but for a man too, because it makes you feel all this sense of shame. This all comes up the surface. Man, I really botched it, right? And that's a crucial moment where I think as coaches we can help men say, listen, this is a chance to take responsibility from what happens from here onward. We're not interested in going backwards and assigning blame and fault. It's not your fault, but what happens from now on is your responsibility. And the very first thing to do is get values that produce the result that you want. And the first step in that is realizing the values I have to date have not produced the result that I wanted in my life, right? So whether that's just no divorce or other things, we are experiencing life as the outcome of our values indirectly, right? Like, the thoughts that you have turn into values that eventually make your decisions. So the decisions this guy has made, as hard as this is to hear, have not produced connection with his wife, polarity, sex in 7 months, right? It's put her in this place where this other guy looks better. And it's not all his fault. I mean, she's got her own issues to work out, but we're not talking about her, so we can't get into her issues, right? And so, yeah, the very first thing, and this is why I think a lot of our practices and groups, we have men right away start getting really clear about their nuts and values. And that's where I would push. Okay, let's get really real about why there's no divorce. You can't just say because God said so. Because first of all, I could take you to school on that really easily if that was your value, right? But I don't think that's the solution. But for some people it is. Because the same guy who's saying that is saying, like, she's so selfish. He's saying all these other kind of low regard things for his wife. And the same God he thinks said, don't divorce your wife, very clearly said to love other people the way you want to be loved. When you want to be loved in a way that somebody tells you you're selfish, or this thinking you're a cunt. I know he didn't say this, but these things are happening in a guy's head. He's thinking all these really horrible things about her, and then he can't understand why she doesn't want to be with him, right? So why don't people ever talk about God in those moments? Because God has a lot to say in the same text about like the day-to-day stuff. Like, how should you be living? How should you treat other people? What does a healthy relationship look like, right? So, but interestingly, people only pull out the God flag and throw it down, when it's about divorce, which I find kind of intriguing. So that was the first thing that stood out. But I could also just empathize, man, what a crappy thing to discover. You're hoping that it's kind of trending in a good direction. The second thing I would be trying to help a guy like this with is, hey, I know it. I know your wife looks really awful right now, but helping him understand she is acting out of what she really believes is best. And with what's going on in her life, she believes that it's much better to forgive a felon, a drug robbing felon who hurt her worse than her husband. She sees that as an easier path to her happiness than a future with him. What can I learn as a husband about that? And again, tough question. Like, we couldn't do that in a video, but that's how I would be exploring that space with him. And then asking, okay, if this is her reality right now, what do your values look like here? Why do you want to stick with this? And is that actually the best thing? What I ultimately find, and you probably do, and it has nothing to do with faith, is a tremendous amount of men cannot distinguish between their emotion and truth because they don't have values or very good values, and they don't know what it's like to be controlled by anything other than their emotions. So whatever they're feeling is their truth, which is a very feminine space to be in if you think about it, energy-wise, right? And a lot of times that guy's conviction is kind of euphemistically just what his emotion is right now. And his emotion is saying, oh, I feel bad for my kids. Oh, I feel this, I feel that. He's telling us this in the words. And if you bring it back up, there's a lot of emotional language in here. Did you see the thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like you were
So,
saying, go ahead.
and that's what I would say, like, historically, and this might piss some people off, but, men have always been known as being able to feel deeply, but do something very different than their emotions that are required.
Mm.
And I noticed in the guys I talk with, this is kind of an attribute that seems to be waning in men these days, is the ability to say, I feel this, but my values say I should do this, right? And it might be really different than your emotions. And I always used it, the guys storming the beach at Normandy. They were shitting their pants with fear, right? But they still picked up a rifle and stormed the beaches because their values were dictating their action. But a lot of guys that come across my path, they're stuck in the emotion of their moment. And it's like they can't seem to find their way into the action. And I would tend to believe a lot of that is just because of being unclear about the values. Because when you're clear about your values, you just do it. Right? Like, we're creatures that are always operating by our values. So if we're operating in limbo, there's a lack of value there. That's kind of my.
Yeah. So I'll add. I mean, I agree fully, of course. And guys well, why should I change my values? Why should I move forward with my values regardless of how I feel? Well, again, evolutionary psychology, like you just said, a strong man, a man that can go to war and protect his family or do what he needs to do, take down the home intruder and protect his family if he needs to, is going to act without being swayed by his emotions. So, no, I'm scared. You take out the intruder is not what a woman wants to hear. Or, no, I'm not going to kill the spider. You kill the spider is not what a woman wants to hear. And she doesn't necessarily know why, but he's willing to move through those emotions. And that's attractive to her, that he has those values. He's willing to move through that fear because of our evolution as well. So this felon, the affair partner guy, he probably has boundaries. He probably knows what he wants. I mean, he's got two women. He's got his fiance and this guy's wife. because he knows what he wants and he goes for it. And I'm sure he has boundaries. Whereas her husband, the man who wrote this, she continues to shit on him and he continues to take it. And as a woman, I've heard this from women and from, wives. And when I work with couples as well, I have in the past worked with couples, she'll say things like, I want you to leave me. I don't deserve you. And she said, I've purposefully treated you badly. I'm purposely being, terrible to you because I want you to leave. And it gets worse and worse and worse because you as a man, he as a man becomes disgusting to her when he won't stand up for himself. So it gets worse and worse and worse. So the counterintuitive truth is that actually having values and boundaries where you're actually willing to replace the water heater, she's going to say, oh shit, he's a higher value man. She's going to feel that you're a higher value man if you're willing to do that.
Yeah, that's the red pill concept of dread, I think, is another angle on that. But I kind of think that's a really interesting subject in general, because the reality is I don't believe it's the feminine because it's a reactionary energy to the action of masculinity. If you are weak in and of yourself, you're not really a safe container for the female in your life to explore herself, really anything, because you're not a strong container. And again, a lot of guys get really mopey here and something like that, but that's not bad. It's just like, if I pour this water out on a flat surface and there's no channel for it, it's just going to scatter. I don't think a woman wants to be just feeling like, man, I have nowhere to flow other than randomness. Like, that's a super insecure, unsettling feeling. But if I carve a big fat channel, out in the ground, and I pour this in, it's predictable, it's reliable. There's a sense for the liquid. I know where I'm going. I can see structure. I know where this is going. And so I think a guy with boundaries, convictions, values, who's clear about them, knows about them, and he's going to live by those, provides this really great, safe, emotionally safe space for a woman that she knows what she can count on. And evolutionary or not, I think women want a reliable man in every sense of the word, right? So that if she wakes up and she's just in a pissy mood, for example, she knows she can walk out, get her coffee in the morning with a total scowl on her face, her hair disheveled, and looking like death warmed over, and he's not going to lose his shit thinking, what did I do? What did I do? Oh no, are we done, right? I mean, just think about the bondage for a woman that who again is kind of programmed to react constantly to the masculine, when she can't even have a bad look on her face for fear of triggering him, right? And look how many men are talking about, this triggered me, this triggered me, this triggered me. I think no matter what your explanation is for how or why that's not attractive, it's just not attractive to women, right? And I don't find, personally, as a person from a faith background, any justification for maintaining that position in faith sources. I think that misunderstands quite greatly, not just like texts like the scripture, but even the nature of the creator. Are we really, let's just suppose you believe in a creator. Is he a pansy? I say he, I believe actually the creator is the combination of the male and female energies in one. But I don't think whatever the creative force is behind the universe is keen on weakness and lackadaisical, not declaring values. And so somebody watching this from a Judeo-Christian perspective ought to know that at least the God in the scriptures is very clear about his boundaries. I say again his just because the pronouns in scripture are masculine. Very clear about what it means to be in a relationship and what happens if you can't step into that space. Like, hey, you don't want to do these things. Yeah, we're not going to have a relationship. And people are really critical about the idea of a creator being like that. But here we are talking about the necessity to be healthy as men, to have very clear boundaries. Right? I think I mentioned this to you in some text or an email response about somebody else's scenario. Um, the God I see in religious text is very clear about who he is, what he'll tolerate and not tolerate, and it's in no way, shape, or form a pansy. So I can't very well use him as an excuse for inaction and being essentially weak. I'm sure some people can, but I just don't find it to be very rational as an excuse.
Yeah. So you and I, well, at least I often use the metaphor of a boat. And I was actually just sharing, I live this constantly of what we're talking about as well in my personal relationship, right? Been together for over 4 years with my fiance, as you mentioned, Cynthia. And we're going for blooming, amazing, transcendent love in the relationship between the two of us. 1+1 = 1,000,000. So if I'm going to sail across the ocean, I want my container, the ship, to be strong and not be broken apart by any storm. And I used that metaphor the other day of, how do I want to say this? That I'm sailing my ship in a direction that's not easy. This isn't calm waters 5 miles offshore, and then if trouble boils, then we just come back to port. I'm breaking the ice through the Arctic Circle here. Like, I'm going into an area I want to have a relationship that's phenomenal, not just ho-hum, mediocre, boring, lukewarm showers, as you said.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's going to be cold, and sometimes it's going to be rough, and that's okay, that we're both in for that, right? And so that's what I also think, that if we don't have the value or the vision or the boundaries, to use those words, and put that on the table and know how to speak with that and be a wordsmith around that, so that it feels to the feminine, it feels emotionally like she knows what she's in for, not just I'm a robot and using masculine logic to explain things, but to actually embody impassioned words, adventurous words, exciting words. And
But it's a
metaphor.
plan too. You're saying,
Yeah.
hey, I know there's going to be bad seas every once in a while, and I'm down for that. I know how I'm going to handle myself in that. But you have to do that from a place of security in both the vessel you have and your ability to captain that vessel, right? So I would, at the end of the day, say everything that ails us is insecurity in our person, right? And yeah, I totally agree that that's very appealing to the feminine, no matter what your explanation for why, right?
Well, back to your point of the man that wins the race is the man that had those characteristics to begin with, not so much that he actually crossed the finish line first, or it's that he had to be that kind of captain from the beginning. And that's what you and I teach. That's what we coach,
Yeah,
how
and
to do that.
I believe that capacity is in all of us to be that, and I think it's latent. I think we have to appropriate those things, and not everybody does. And in my experience, it's some level of fear and insecurity that is keeping people from appropriating really their fundamentally awesome nature, which has the capacity for extreme courage, for perseverance, for doing hard things, for really having awesome values, and nuts, and for all of the Jungian archetypes, for example. That's in every man. It's just a matter of what's keeping you from living that. And yeah, it's always some form of insecurity. So that's why I think faith's a really interesting thing to talk about, and it informs a man's belief systems pretty significantly. But as far as an excuse why you stay in a marriage, everybody's a little different that way. But I think it's, you said it's a shield. I want to see what's behind the shield, like ask deeper questions. I think you're really great at that, and in some ways because you're not sharing this kind of common dialect of cliches and meme type of statements. You'll have a great inroad with a person saying that, because you're going to be like, I have no idea what that means. It's a bullshit statement to me, because it's a special vocabulary that you carry around, right? This is one reason I don't like it, because I don't think we should use vocabularies or like secret handshake stuff. Like if you're watching a conversation I'm having with a Christian guy, you ought to be able to understand what we're talking about without having to be like have a special glossary, right? So if you can't understand what a guy like that is saying without a glossary and deep explanation, that's actually to your benefit. You can say, well, you're going to have to explain what you mean there. because I don't know what that means. Tell me more. And what's going to happen is that guy's going to have to get super clear. And that's going to be really uncomfortable if he's just relying upon a packaged belief system.
Yeah, I love the simplicity of what's underneath that. What are the values that are driving that scripture that you just quoted to me, or the shield that you're holding up? What's behind the shield, to your point? Yeah.
The irony about the no divorce thing, not to get super theological, but one of the general themes in the Judeo-Christian scriptures is, that basically the God Yehovah, Yahweh, goes by different names, chose a people group for himself, and not at the exclusion of like everybody else is going to hell. I don't mean that, but he chooses this people group to be like kind of his representation, his gang, and that people group is Israel, not to be confused with modern day nation of Israel. This is just the descendants of Abraham. But they go on, and he basically says, listen, if you're willing to walk in my ways, we'll be in a relationship. And if you're not, I'm going to divorce you. Use that word. They go basically whoring after the gods of the groups around them. They get into like really ridiculous level of idolatry, like temple prostitution, sacrificing kids, like really horrible stuff. And he says clearly, all right, I'll divorce you, right? And so the very God of the universe, of the confession of both Jews and Christians alike, clearly divorced his people in the scriptural narrative. And yet people are convinced that somehow it's a godly attribute to stay in a marriage no matter what. And so I find that ironic that they have a conviction that even the God of the universe didn't maintain for himself. But yeah, there's a lot more to that, depending on how deep somebody wants to get into things. If you got a really like studious, person from a Jewish background or evangelical or Catholic background, I love talking about that stuff. But most often, I think people haven't just thought it through enough. And I don't say that dogmatically. I think at the end of the day, you or I, we're never going to actually act differently than our beliefs. So if you genuinely believe that your God does not want you to ever get a divorce, that's really that's how you're going to live. So again, go back to the beginning. I challenge people about what do you believe and why do you believe it and how effective is it? Because that's a key thing. If you have this confession, hey, I have this God who loves me, he gave me all these beliefs that are ineffective, that's incongruent to me. Like, why would a God that loves you give you guidelines for living that produce horrible results? So one of two things is happening. Either he's a horrible God, and why a lot of people say, yeah, why would I want anything to do with that? Or maybe I've misunderstood what these guidelines are, right? Or maybe I've just made my own shit up and said that it's God telling me that. That could be a lot of stuff. But either way, I believe it's kind of incumbent on me to sort of verify by results if I believe the right things. Because if I have a shitty life and I've said, well, God did this, how on earth would that be a great representation of the power of the Creator in my life, right? Like, if I just lived an absolute shit life, what are you talking right now? You'd be like, that guy is effed in the head, right? So,
right.
So it should be effective. And I think that's got to be the test for any belief system. Is it producing what you need and want it to produce? And if it's not, as hard as that is, you have to challenge it. And that's really scary for religious people because they're worried that one, they believe the wrong thing, or two, that it might take them to a scary place where they don't believe anymore. And I can sympathize with that. But there again, that would just tell me there's insecurity there. And I hold the view that it does not please the Creator for us to be insecure. So if you're insecure, there again, I'd say you have to rethink your belief system because it's not working for you if you're insecure.
Well, it's interesting what you just said. And I know we're getting short on time, so we'll give those just a couple. I've learned though, people want to find us, we got to give a couple links. So we'll do that at the end here, but God doesn't want you to be insecure. And yet insecurity is a part of our human drive to achieve more. And
we should do a whole
yeah.
episode on insecurity, because I think it has some pretty unique views.
Yeah. Well, and I agree absolutely. And there's so much about being human that's paradoxical in nature. So the need for safety and the need for adventure, the need for security and the need for excitement, they're paradoxical. And what you just said of, so God isn't intending for you to be insecure, or God wants you to lean into that and move forward regardless. And yet, though, we all have insecurities as a person, as a human. And so those are paradoxical forces as well. So, well, what do you do with that? I think that's part of our existence. I think and whether you call this religious or spiritual or whatever you want to label it, I think we are here to play out this dance of paradoxical forces, yin and yang, however you want to name it. So I find that very interesting. It's not falling into one or the other. It's not to be
tension.
Bipolar. Yeah, the tension.
Yeah, and actually that's a very Hebrew and ancient culture idea, which modernists don't handle well. We do not handle tension in ideas and thought very well in the modern age, and that's it's been that way for us for quite a while. And it's unfortunate because we can't appreciate the nuance that something is true except for when it isn't, right? That you need to be safe except for when you need to stop being safe to do something that's more important than being safe, right? So, I don't mean the eradication of insecurity. I mean, there's a certain kind of insecurity that plagues people that I believe is rectifiable, and that's an insecurity of your person, your worth, your values, and your significance. I don't think that's an idea we should hold in tension. I think that's an idea that is 100% in common, to humanity. And I think actually the Judeo-Christian narrative has a very good explanation for that if you take it out of institutionalism and you just understand it at its face value. But insecurity of those things will cripple you in life, and it's undermining everything that happens to a man that is not going well, especially in his relationship. Because if you and I, if we're insecure in our person, we're going to take that need for security, which keeps coming up all the time, and we're going to try to find it in, like you said, achievement or another person. And both of those are dead ends, because achievement means you're going to be exhausted because you have to keep being better and better, and there's no end to that. And you might feel really good until you find somebody else who's killing it better than you are, and now you feel like shit again because you're not anywhere close to where this person who's like master level is, right? And you experience all the shame, and you fall in a heap on the ground, and now you're like back to square one. That's the achievement-based security. The other is you put that into someone you love, right? And you send them things like, you're my whole world. And she's like, I don't want to be with you, right? So I mean, both are dead ends.
Yeah, both are external sources of validation, instead of either you could call it God within you or the universe expressing itself or your unconscious seeking enlightenment. All of that comes from within you. It's not some external. So to your point of, if faith or God is this external set of rules or external validation, it's never going to achieve what you want it to be.
Yeah, that's one reason I'm not involved with, any institutional expression of faith, because one of my chief frustrations with them is that they conceptualize the creator as being outside, away from, other than, right? Because they're trying to stay away from polytheism. They're trying to stay away from the idea that I'm God. And because they don't want to even come close to that, they kind of mute what the scriptures say about being in union with the creator. So it gives this idea that like God is up there somewhere. It's like some old dude with a white hair, looks kind of Santa, sitting on some throne. That puts God at this distance now that I have to look outside. It's like, by its conceptualization, it's other, external. But the text all says union, right? And so if I have a union now with my creator, now I'm free to actually look within, but it's like a looking within in a way that is bound and in unity with the creative force of the universe, right? And so to me, what I love about that is it supports self-sovereignty, but also the relationship with the supernatural. So like it creates that tension we talked about. They're both in balance. They're both true. I'm not looking outside of me, but I'm also not looking at myself as some sort of deity either, which I think is a ridiculous notion. So that's where I see the text and experience it. But I think because of the religious instruction out there, that's not the typical view of a like a person from a Jewish background or a Christian background. Very much sees God external. I don't think they should, but it's kind of handy if you keep people afraid of an external source. You can kind of manipulate and control people. But if we took all the institution away and just let the text speak for itself, I don't think that would be most people's conclusion.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, next podcast is going to be on insecurity. Absolutely. My website, and I'll ask you to share your Mentoring Men website, Sven. So, guys,
that one's not ready.
Yeah, well, grab your Mentoring Men website. Sven and I are both very busy. I'm basically full up with my one-on-one clients. This is December of 2020 right now. I'm doing small groups. I'm starting a small group, which is 6 men, and that's already 4 men full. So I only have 2 more spots. And I'm starting that 6-man group in January. And I guess point being that Sven and I are giving our heart for this. And I want to learn. He said he wants to learn. We want to, give each other sort of this master's degree in manhood. And I'm curious about spirituality in every angle. And I love our conversations, Sven. So yeah, for me, greatmenmovemountains.com. I've got a 45-minute free audiobook and also a 10-day free program on my website. So go to greatmenmovemountains.com and check out the free stuff. You click free stuff and check it out. Otherwise, we've got the men's group. I've got a free Facebook group as well. And I'm going to be uploading videos and things onto Sven's Mentoring Men website as well. And Sven does coaching as well. So yeah, give us your website, Sven.
Yeah, well, Mentoring Men is it's going to be launching probably in February. It's actually a network of coaches and mentors sharing their heart with a community of men who are also looking to kind of master the masculine experience. But it's under development. And so the only people that are allowed to be there right now are the coaches and mentors and a few kind of friends and family to start until February. That's going to be a really cool experience, though. In the meantime, yeah, I could be reached on svenmasterson.com. I don't have any free books and all this. Maybe I need to take some instruction from Jeff. But I do actually invite people to get in touch and set up a free call if they're interested in pursuing a mentoring coaching relationship. And I would love to get to know people. I have about, I'd say 2.5 slots open at the moment. This is all I really have room for. And one reason I'm started Mentoring Men is to make more things available to more men in a much easier format. So I would love to hear from people regardless, just to get to know them and their story, especially if they're from a background that's, confused about things we talked about today, because it's a very confusing topic to
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're that half man, you really need the 2.5 men. You said 2.5 slots open. If you're that half man, you need
that's just the slot reserved for the guy that wants to talk a little.
Yeah. I'm just joking. What's going to be the extension on Mentoring Men?
It's mentoring.men. Yeah.
Oh, mentoring.
Yeah, the site's under development. There's actually a private network, which is men.mentoring.men. If you go there now, you have to request to join, and we're probably not going to let you in, to be honest.
Okay. Well, that's cool. Guys are curious. So February 2021, mentoring.men, and mine is greatmenmovemountains.com. Awesome. Sven, again, next podcast, guys, is going to be about insecurity.
Yeah, let's do it. I can't wait for that one. That's fantastic.
Great. Thanks, Sven. I appreciate it, man.
All right. You have a great day.
You too. Ciao.